Good evening and welcome to the Finance Committee hearing for today, Monday, December the 9th. I'm Councilwoman Ty Atkins, President of the Gary Common Council, representative of the 4th District, and I'm a supporting co-chair of the Finance Committee. In the absence of Councilwoman Mary Brown, I will be hosting, as she has given me permission to do so this evening. We have two ordinances on the agenda to review. CPO 2024-89, which is an ordinance approving salaries and operating budgets for the City of Gary's grant and Special Revenues Fund for the calendar year 2025, as well as CPO 2024-90, an ordinance approving salaries and operating budgets for the City of Gary's Community Development Block Grant Program, Emergency Solutions Home Program, as well as the Foreclosure Prevention Grant Program for program year 2024 and the fiscal year 2024-2025. Both of these are sponsored by the Mayor, Eddie Melton, as well as our City Controller, Mrs. Salita Green. We will review these in opposite orders. I just called them out. CPO 2024-90 will be first. This is related to the operating budget for community development, and then we will do the subsequent series that's included in the special revenue ordinance. So at this time, I'll ask our Executive Director for Community Development, Reagan Hatcher, to approach the podium, and then we can do an overview. And 1 second, I was going to say representative. 1 second, Executive Director Hatcher. Colleagues, the supporting documentation for this ordinance was just passed out to you. All of the relative budgets, unfortunately, we did not have those beforehand, so you should have that now. And then also the 2024 program year action plan, you should have copies of that as well. Okay.
Thank you. And yes, we submitted our
Reagan, turn the mic on.
Yes, ma'am. There I am. Okay, thank you, Madam President. We did submit our budget with our ordinance for review for the council, but found out that only 3 pages were attached. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but we requested a fresh copy from the Finance Department just to make sure you all had the entire budget. So in essence, the Community Development Department receives approximately $3.5 million every year from HUD in order to allocate money towards streets, sidewalks, demolition, new home building, homeless shelters, and a number of other different really important projects for the community. In that, we do an annual action plan every year, and that annual action plan is usually presented by the mayor of the city to say what we plan to do with those funds going forward. So what you all have, the annual action plan itself is about 250 pages, but what you all have is a pretty good summary of the annual action plan. It's either 4 or 5 pages, and it just goes down and shows exactly what our proposed projects are. With HUD, as with any federal agency, as things change throughout the year, we're able to request amendments to the annual action plan, but our initial annual action plan plus any amendments always have to be noticed in the local paper, and we have to hold a hearing. That hearing was held for the 2024 action plan back in July, and then given the amount of time that we have to wait as the waiting period, and then submit it for HUD for approval and review. And so that is what you have before you is a summary of that action plan. Also, I passed out the complete budget that should have been attached to the ordinance, and there's not many changes in there. Since I got to community development in January, we realized there were some programs that just weren't operating in a very efficient or effective way for the community. And so we had to remove some of those programs. So right now we're only implementing 3 programs out of community development. And community development is more like a financier. So like if there's a project that the city wants to do, whether that be a demo, they want to pave new streets, if they want to replace sidewalks or curbs or any other, nearly $18,000 to those who are employees of the City of Gary for down payment assistance, and then 6% up to $10,000 for those who are not an employee, but they are moving into our community or buying a home in our community as a first-time home buyer. So that's one of the biggest programs that's run out of community development. Second is our home repair program. We had to adjust that program this year to only include emergency repairs. So we may do things like roofing, if the roof is in very terrible condition, heating and cooling, or other emergency repairs for people in the community who meet certain income standards. And so those are just two examples of what we do, but primarily we finance other projects throughout the city.
Thank you. So what we typically do is also go through each individual department and review the funding allocation for the salary portion as well as the operating portion. And we could start with the three that was initially attached to our first. And if it's a duplicate, once we get to it in the packet that you just gave us, then we can just skip it.
Okay.
So we have the foreclosure grant. This is Department 8162. This is respective to the lead paint and hazardous control, grant funding / program.
Mm-hmm. So our foreclosure program or NSP program, that's a grant that doesn't come through HUD. That one actually comes through the state of Indiana. And what we do with that is we do lead paint testing through that program, and that's where the funding comes from. But we also counsel people who are going through foreclosure and try to discuss with them their financial situation. We talk to the bank on their behalf. Other ways to keep them out of the foreclosure process. Judith Sampson, who is in our office, is the NSP representative, and so that is an additional grant that we get from the state of Indiana.
Thank you. And then there's a proposed salary increase. Just justification for that.
Let's see, NSP coordinator, yes. You will see salary increases throughout this budget. We have had we've been stuck at a certain level for a while now. And so when we came in, we just looked at each one and made a determination based on other communities at what salary level we should be at. Luckily for us, for community development, we had some retiree, we had some other positions that had been empty for a while. And as we restructured the department when I arrived in July, we found that there were some duplication of services that were not being taken into account. And so we were able to adjust salaries in a positive way.
Okay, thank you. So we also have, that was attached to our packet that we had initially, the non-program income. It's Department 8103. Mm-hmm. Just the operating portion is attached.
So the non-program income with NSP, we receive payment through the state for each person that is counseled through community development. So there's an office here in Gary. There's one in East Chicago. It's one in either Highland or Munster. But when someone calls the state of Indiana, IDAC, and says, we're going through foreclosure, they refer them out to one of those agencies. And so for the referrals that we receive, we also generate income. So that's that non-program income that you see there.
Okay, so the $100,000 is, I just didn't see a 2023 approved budget, so is this new?
No, it's not new, but we decided to break it out into a line item of non-program income just to ensure that it was being accounted for properly.
Okay, so it wasn't allocated in 2023?
That's right.
Okay. Then we'll go into the packet that you gave us that was submitted before, but now that we have in front of us. Mm-hmm. So the first program is for demolition.
Oh, yeah, demolition. Let me flip back.
And then we have the salary portion first and then the operation, so we can go in that order.
Okay, so demolition, and there's no change in demolition as we're working through the responsibilities to what office. Demolition never fell under community development. It fell under redevelopment. It may be shifting again, but right now it is still under redevelopment. and we didn't receive any requests for change. So right now we have a demolition coordinator and a demolition inspector, and so we left it as is.
Give me 1 second. My vice president, council members, does everyone have the budget sheet? Yeah. Yep.
I have an extra.
No.
Do we need an extra?
Councilman Washington, Councilman Washington. We just on the first page. Yeah. No, that's not right. That's not right. The first page should say demolition. No. So we're on 2024 90. It was the pack that was just, it should have been. Sorry about that. You got it? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay.
Demolition? So demolition, as I was saying, is not run under community development. They're just one of the departments that community development funds. It's actually under redevelopment, and so we didn't receive any requests to increase, decrease, do anything. So right now we have a demolition coordinator and the inspection tech.
Thank you. That's on the salary portion. Any questions, colleagues? Any questions on the, I guess, 3 departmental programs, I guess I should say, that we have reviewed thus far? We'll go that way so we could streamline the process. Okay, we'll go to the operation portion for demolition community development.
Okay. So again, these numbers stayed, let's see, I'm sorry. I need glass. I'm getting to the point where I can't see. Okay. So right now we're kind of in the same part, except for if you go down to line 361, contractual maintenance agreement. Those are the dollars that we actually use to demo. So this is the first year that we've increased it to the maximum amount that we can. That number is I think that's the $628,323. And so that's how much that we have to spend for this year in actual demolition. Much of the demolition is done in-house, but we have some homes that require an outside contractor. And so those are our demolition dollars.
Thank you. I was going to say Representative Hatchard. Thank you, Ms. Hatchard. Just question, the source of the the 628, is that from CDBG or?
This is CDBG funds for these first few departments. So right now we are in CDBG.
And what % of CDBG funds do we get annually, do we allocate to demo?
So our total CDBG is $3,256,792. And so this year we increased it to the maximum of $628,000, and I'm not sure what that percentage is,
It's
but
around 20, a little bit more than 20%.
we did the max, whatever the max that we were able to do. And I can pass this around.
And just to confirm, the maximum amount allocation is determined by HUD, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so we abide by their numbers. And they set maximums on things like demolition, which is considered blight in the community, and also administrative costs. So we know exactly how much we're allowed to spend on all of these things, and we stay within the limits, of course. So yes, we increased this year from approximately $224,000 to $628,000.
Thank you. And just for the record, I don't think that we stated this in the overview thus far, but the Community Development Department operates on a different operating year. The fiscal year actually starts in June of 2024 and it ends in May of 2025. And so just so that we could be consistent in terms of understanding what the operational year is, it's different than the operational year of January 1 to December 31st for the balance of the fiscal city.
And even with that, we are always working almost a year behind as well, just because when we start our budgetary process, we have so many hearings and public hearings that we have to go through. By the time we get to the end, we're usually about 6 months into that year. So our next fund is, department is 5583, code enforcement. Code enforcement is now run by Anthony Edwards, and he came in with so many wonderful ideas. We've had a chance to talk regularly over the past 6 months about what they need, what they could use. And we found out also that we have non-program income that comes from all of the fines and fees that code enforcement collects. That all comes back to a non-program income account where we can use it to upgrade code enforcement vehicles, code enforcement uniforms, or add more code enforcement employees. So this is one of those departments that actually funds itself. We do put in money through CDBG, but all of the extras that they buy are from those fines and fees that we collect. So in code enforcement, we eliminated the part-time office manager and made that person a full-time administrative assistant. This person is responsible for being in office, inputting all fines or tickets, and following through on those. And then we also added one additional inspector. We hope next year to add 4 to 6 part-time inspectors for the weekend as well. So we are building code enforcement to be really impactful in the city.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. And first, let me ask my colleagues. Colleagues, any questions related to code enforcement thus far before I start probing? Okay. So I know we stated that basically this is a entity that is self-serving in terms of the revenue that they generate with fines. Mm-hmm. What is the annual amount that we typically obtain? I know that I see the operational budget increased almost double from from 2023. But is it $500,000 or is it exactly around the $400K?
Well, so when I got into the position, we found out that we had not received any of the fines or fees since approximately 2016. So I began to work with Ms. Green in finance to figure out not just why those funds hadn't come in, but how we can ensure that they come into community development on a regular basis. And so what we came up with was a happy medium where we will be receiving approximately $230,000 or $32,000 from those fines. We're only going back to 2021, but we will receive those fines from 2021. Officer Edwards is here. He can tell you better than I can how many tickets he's written since July, but I think we're going to surpass that total 221 even in this year. So yes, our budget did double. Mm-hmm. However, we will be sustaining that through an improved process.
Okay. So yeah, I think, moving forward, council members would just want to understand what our targeted collection rate in terms of total revenue is for code enforcement, as we know that is a painstake for us. As well as our constituents. I believe 80% of the calls, or I would say 60% of the calls are like code enforcement issues. The balance is like general service concerns that, we try to relate to the administration. And so it would be good to know what our strategy is to increase revenue there. Mm-hmm. Also, just one of them is just the, what do you call that? Just, we mentioned this before in the previous administration, but if we could do a slash for the job description, as we know that these records are also accessible for the public, but having inspector as the same title under code enforcement and inspector in the building department, sometimes it's confusing.
Okay.
And so we had asked if it could be noted that this is actually a code enforcement officer position and not just inspector to designate. Also, I noticed that the administrative assistant, I know that that is needed, but it is at the same salary as an actual code enforcement officer. So I would think that the, duties and responsibilities are differential between the two. And there should possibly be a difference in terms of the.
So we discussed that, and Officer Edwards can explain better than I can, but he was adamant that that person that is in the office, that is making sure all those tickets are inputted and to make sure that they are being paid or moving through the process is just as important as those on the streets actually writing the tickets.
And I agree with that, but I think that the code enforcement officer should definitely be paid more than an administrative assistant. That is a dangerous job. I've actually, and some of my colleagues can attest to this, probably done ride-arounds with code enforcement officers. And also, I thought that there will be a strategy so that we can get support on the weekends for these positions as well. And I knew that in our operating budget, there was a lot of review about us ensuring that we were in compliance to the labor law with if there was additional overtime, we had to ensure that we were accounting for that, or the respective salary had to be at that 43,000, I think 888 price point. So if I know this is probably a question for Mr. Edwards, if you have any insight in terms of if you all actually review the law to ensure in compliance with this position, and if not, that is something that I would ask for you all to look at. You gonna look at it, or you got something for me? You gonna look at it? Okay. So I guess just to clear those points up, just changing the title to code enforcement officer or slash if you want to keep it as an inspector, and so we can have differential.
Oh, no, we'll change that to code enforcement officer.
Okay. Also revisiting the salary of a code enforcement officer. I get the administrative assistant position is well needed, and that is, within the range when we look at our comparables to that particular position across the enterprise. When we did the operating budget, it was in line, but I do not think that position warrants the same duties, responsibilities, and needs that a code enforcement officer has, and I think the code enforcement officer position should be looked at for an increase.
Wonderful. I think they'd be happy about that. Yes. Okay, thank you.
If you got it, and that's why I'm pushing for us to get more, what's the annual target in terms of your violations, because that's what's funding it, right? And so if we can get that, the director position that's listed here, is this just a stipend? It says part-time, but I don't think it's part-time, right? It's actually a full-time position, but a subsidy?
And this is Officer Edwards' position, and he was at a level, what we did was, and as you can see, the actual, the officers were originally at 32,000, which was the lowest paid in our area. And so we looked around, what is the range for the other departments, East Chicago, Hammond, Maryville, and we found that the lowest of the three was 39. So we thought we'd start there and move up. Same thing with Officer Edwards' salary. It was very low, and so, but his does come from the general fund. So instead of increasing general fund dollars, we just put this addition onto CDBG dollars.
Yeah, and that's agreeable. I just think the employee type should be changed to full-time instead of part-time, because that's not correct in terms of reflecting here for director.
Yes.
Because it's just a subsidy.
It's a subsidy, yes.
Yeah, and then also the new inspector just confirmed the price point is at 30 and not consistent with the other inspectors that's listed here / code enforcement officers. So that needs to be adjusted as well.
It should have been the same.
Okay.
It should have been the same.
Colleagues, any questions, updates? My last one, this new code enforcement officer that's brought on board, what's the strategy there? I know currently right now everyone is designated to a respective area or district, and is that going to be the same strategy? Outside of, 101 and I think 106, the two areas that's
the track.
Yes, the two census tracts that are not, we're utilizing our code enforcement officers that are being paid out of our general fund to support those areas in terms of focus. So this new one, just the strategy related to that.
Yes, ma'am. The new code enforcement officers will be a reserve officer. All of the officers that's on now are civilians, but we're bringing on a reserve officers so they can have arrest powers, so that we want get the officers that work in patrol to come out and do tolls or arrests. So the reserve officers, and as Ms. Reagan had added, we have 4 new code enforcement that we're trying to part-time, which would be reserve officers also, so they can work weekends, 4 to 12s, so that we can catch the legal dumpers and those that are violating code.
Okay, so strategy will be that they will be kind of all over.
Yes.
Okay, all
Yes,
right.
ma'am.
Very good. Thank you.
Cool, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Councilman Washington.
I just want to thank Officer Edwards for that and explaining to the public, because I remember having that discussion with you. A lot of the complaints that happen from residents are usually during the day, but the crux of what needs to happen to catch illegal dumpers and people like that is in the evening time between the 4 to 12 shift, where you can sneak up on people, because typically folks are not illegally dumping materials at 10 o'clock in the morning time. So thank you for that, and hopefully we can do more in the future budgets to get more inspectors, or not inspectors, but code enforcement officers to help out, because as the president say, it is a very dangerous job when you catch people doing something illegally. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilman Washington.
Madam Chair.
Councilman Halliburton.
Ms. Hatchard or Mr. Edwards, can you give me an idea of what the code enforcement generate their funds so far?
You got that? What you think?
So I'm going to chime in if that's okay. You said so far this year?
This year.
I don't know if he has that
They have,
information.
I know they just got the administration. I wonder if they got the numbers.
Yes, sir.
Since he's been head of code enforcement, which has been since it's after I got here, so September-ish, they've written about 2,000 tickets. So I don't know what that translates to into dollars, but that's the amount of tickets. And I have to say, I mean, just his level of data, he's out on the weekends, even if nobody else is out on the weekends, and going into houses where people are working. $127,000. So he's going into houses on the weekends, stopping roof work, because a lot of those guys, they like to do it on the weekends because they don't think anyone's out. So just the level of the presence is certainly increased since he's taken over. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. Vice President Latham.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you. Representative Hatcher, I don't see any money in travel education. I'm wondering, how are our code enforcement officers or reserve officers receiving training?
Well, the reserve wouldn't train through us. Come on.
Our reserve officers will be trained through the police department, and we just talked to our administrative staff. There is a convention every year for code enforcement that I looked into, and our mayor and our chief of staff and all is allowing us to go to those trainings. So not only will we be trained by the police department, we'll be trained by a convention that all the other cities that have training to better support our community, if that makes sense.
One more thing.
Okay, sorry.
And for those, because they have a non-program income fund, that's what we would use to pay those things out of. Because CDBG is kind of tricky.
Representative Hatcher.
I'm sorry. It's a bit tricky about what we can and can't pay for out of there. And we can pay for training out of there, but because we generate non-program income, and we have to use it towards some CDBG program, it gives us a way to pay for those kind of things, something to use to pay those things out of. So that's where uniforms come from. We can't pay for uniforms directly out of CDBG. We can't pay for cars directly out of CDBG, but we can use that non-program income to make sure they have everything they need to do the job.
Excuse me, Madam President, can I ask a question?
Thank you. Councilman Whittington?
Thank you so much. Quick question. In regards to the tickets and the fines, what do we think the actual capture rate is? So if we write 100 tickets, how much do we actually expect to claim?
Well, the great thing that Officer Edwards is implementing is we're actually going to start putting liens on these properties now. And that's something that's always been available to us, but we've just never done it. And so if we have a ticket on a house and that ticket is not paid within the period of time that it should be paid, then the administrative assistant will simply print out the lien. I would sign it as Director of Community Development, and we will record that in the recorder's office. So it's a way to catch even if they don't pay.
That was my next question, so
Yeah.
thank you. I appreciate you.
Yes.
Thank you, council members. Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Hatcher.
Okay, so next we have street improvement, and that's another one of those things that we simply pay for. So that would come from Public Works. They would prepare whatever the project is and make sure that it's approved through us, through HUD, and then we would be able to fund that project. Next, we have the Gary Human Relations Commission, where the salaries of the executive director and the office administrative assistant has stayed constant. Their entire budget has throughout from last year to this year, so there are no changes. Then we have the Gary Youth Services Bureau.
Can you go back for me?
Sure.
So for street improvement, is this a new allocation for us for this program year?
Yes, this is our allocation for this year. Now, don't look at that number because we have funds that we still have to expend from 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023
Right.
that have not been expended yet. So this just goes into the larger pot in order to repair the streets.
Okay, so we'll have this in addition to whatever additional allocations we have from, just use the word, the pot of funding that we have for previous operating years that we can expend. Plus, we'll have wheel tax funding, plus our community crossings grant funding for paving.
Yes, the answer is yes to all of that. Now, one thing that I am determined to do before year end 2025, December 31st, is to expend all dollars. I think that what we have gotten caught in is this cycle where we roll money over in an effort to, have a rainy day fund. But what it's doing is it's stopping us from being able to request additional funds from HUD. If we request additional funds, they say, well, you guys haven't spent money from 4 years ago. And so my ultimate goal, and Public Works can attest to this because I'm looking for whatever streets that they cannot pay for through community crossings, through those other grant programs through the state, to make sure we get all of this street and sidewalk money out in the next year.
Okay, thank you for that. We can move ahead.
Okay. Gary, Human Relations, that budget, salary, and operating has stayed the same from last year to this year. Same with the Youth Services Bureau. There was a slight increase from the director from $45,000 to $47,700, and the food service manager. This was a part-time position for
wait a
the
minute.
summer.
Where are you at?
Gary Youth Services
Okay,
Bureau.
so let me take a pause. Any questions, colleagues, about human relations, streets improvement? No, we're good? Okay. Now we're on the salary portion for YSB. Okay.
And so that food services manager, which is a part-time position for the summer, increased from 2,000 to 13,000, and that was for last summer's programming. And then the director had a slight increase from 45,000 to 47,700.
Okay. So of course, I'm going to ask the justification for an increase for YSB director.
So this increase was already implemented when I took over at Community Development. This budget is in an effort to catch up to that. I came in July the 9th, and so that was an increase already. Now, I think it had something to do, and this is speculation, but I think it had something to do with the raise that all employees got that year before.
And I'm just curious, other than the intern program, I didn't know that there was a food program that was executed this summer.
And I can call up the director of YSB if you all have questions.
That would be great. And
Okay.
just to confirm, that the raise that was given to employees was 3%, and this is slightly higher than that. It should have been at 46,350, and in fact, that's what we were doing here. This one is 47,740 and 50 cents, which is substantially high, in my opinion, at this particular role. So the 3% from the 45K that was approved in 2023 would have been 46,350. And I'm trying to pull up the 2024 budget to see if we had a change on that as well. But I would like to hear from the YSB director.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good evening. YSB currently does not have a food services manager. That position was changed in 2023. That is an administrative role, and that was changed from the former director of the Youth Services Bureau.
Okay, so in 2023, which was last year, you're stating that the position was changed in 2023
Absolutely.
to what?
Administrative role. So they get rid of the food services because the Youth Services does not actively operate a food service program during the summer. And the former director, to my understanding, changed the position to an administrative role,
So I
and it's
don't,
part-time.
sure, so if it was an administrative role, the title would have been changed. And I don't see that council approved that in the budget. Did you have that changed in the budget that you have for 2023?
I did not make any changes to that particular budget in 2023 because I wasn't here. So I came into the door with that understanding.
So
and
where did
this-
the understanding come from?
From the budget that we received. It did say that it was a food service manager on the budget, but we
Okay.
was instructed that it wasn't a food service manager program for youth services. But the title still stayed the same, but it changed on our internal processes. But currently, we do not have a food service manager.
Got it. So though council approved a full service manager, that position was given to an individual who was doing administrative duties?
Absolutely.
Okay. And that position was not filled this summer?
No.
Is that correct? But the position was still, the salary was $2,000 for someone who was doing administrative duties?
Yes, and I believe that there's a breakdown in that salary as well. It is divided in two separate portions. I believe that that 2,000 is paid out of community development dollars, but the additional monies that is paid out for this particular part-time position, I am unsure where that additional monies is coming from. I
Okay.
believe the total was 13,000.
Okay. So I would like to get understanding of that, and you can give us confirmation. Again, we only have one meeting left in the year, which is tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And so we would need to have it before the meeting tomorrow to understand, I guess, the complexity related to that. Because I don't even see it in 253, which was the parks general fund levy budget, I should say, that we passed in the total operating budget. I don't see a part-time administrative that will add up to that. And then also just, I'm trying to find the YSB. I'm looking in the 2023 special revenue budget that was approved as well, just to see. So Ms. Hatcher, just to confirm, when the comment was made that we're trying to catch up, has finance already paid at this 3% at this level?
Yes, that's my understanding. Have they paid you?
Yes.
Okay. So that was done 2 years ago. And I don't see it in the budget for 2024 or 2023. So I would ask Ms. Salita if you could give me confirmation on what happened with that. Or if it was, I don't know everything. I'm just trying to go back to my old notes.
Good evening, council members.
Good evening.
Those were the budgets that were submitted to us by CDBG, but I understand that in 2022, maybe 21, and I mentioned this with Department 101602, the CDBG department had employees that were getting a raise in 101602, and that had to be in 2022. Because I mentioned to the director that that department in 101602 cannot accommodate employees because it's for operations only. And I also asked her, I told her we were taking them out of the budget and they needed to be added to whatever department they're in community development.
Wait a minute. So there was salary that would be taken out of 602?
Yes, if you look back and look in the 41 series, 2022 and maybe 23.
Yeah, I have both up right now.
Okay. And there should not have been.
Salaries out of 22? From 602?
101602.
Yeah. Okay. I'll take my question offline. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions?
Just one.
Councilman?
Yes. What was that? Was it a flat rate, a salary increase across the board for Gary workers?
I can explain. It was a 3% increase for Civic City employees.
All right. Maybe my math isn't mathing, but this is like a 6% increase to me.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned, that the
Okay.
differential, 3% would have been 46,350. And so
Okay.
Controller Green just stated that, it might have been some complexities with the ordinances, but I pull it up and I don't want to waste.
Well,
you.
and we just want to, in this budget going forward, we just want to make sure
It's
everything.
corrected. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yes. And so then we have our accessibility program. Now, this program is just for the ramps. We do ramps out of community development. They run about $15,000 each. We haven't had any requests this year, but we always allocate $100,000 to that. So this is just people who live in their homes and become wheelchair bound and need a ramp to get up the stairs to get into the house. So this is one of the projects that programs that we fund. We have the emergency repair program. This is the one I spoke about earlier. This is if your heat goes out unexpectedly or you have a tree fall on your house and have a terrible hole in your roof. It's not to replace, it's only to repair in a emergency way that will give you the time to hire someone to do the actual repair.
I'm going to ask.
Wow.
We had to cut it that much. Okay.
That's an offline conversation.
All right.
Yeah, so the answer is yes.
Okay.
Our next one is our 108 loan payment. We allocate so much money to pay the 108 loan that was taken to upgrade the Hudson Campbell, to build the fire station in Glen Park, and there's one more project in there. But this loan was taken out approximately 10 years ago, and so this is our payment amount that we budget for every year. So this is when we start getting into the salaries for community development. And our salaries are really interesting because they're pulled usually from different funds. So we have CDBG, home, and ESG. Out of each one of those, we have a maximum percentage of which we can have administrative costs. So in some situations, we have people who are paid from one pot of money and focus on one thing. In other situations, we may have someone who is paid from housing and from emergency services or CDBG, because they take on more than one role in the office. We've been trying to, as we went through this year's annual action plan, we looked at everyone's role and made some determinations of how the office would flow most efficiently. And so we kind of came up with that. So this is our housing rehab administration. So this includes everyone who comes to sign up for any emergency repair, any ramps, anything dealing with their roofs, or this is where the senior repair was, or the homeowner's repair was, or this is those situations if we have to spend money on a house, these will be the people who are administering that. So out of our housing rehab administration, we have a housing services specialist, our deputy director, and then we had a second housing specialist that was eliminated in the upcoming year. Let's see, and then let me move on to the.
Hold on, Reagan, so we're funding it though, right, for this program year? For 2024,
Yes,
25?
for 2024.
Okay.
And so that's what you see in front of you.
Okay.
You have
Okay.
the deputy director's position is paid from this spot and one other spot. And you'll see that as we continue to go through.
Okay, just make a note on here that we added the housing specialist, and put new, since we're adding it back.
Yes, ma'am. Somebody stole my, oh no, they didn't. Got it. Okay.
And I think our totals are off. So our totals. Yeah. So just, I mean, it's for 2023. For 2023, the total should be the 87,149.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I see that.
And same thing under original salary.
Yes.
Okay.
Should be there. Yes, got it.
I'll take a pause. Colleagues, any questions, comments thus far? Very good. Okay.
I had one question, Madam President.
Councilwoman Ivy.
Ms. Hatcher,
Pull
you
your mic
mentioned-
down. We can't hear you.
You mentioned about the accessibility program that you hadn't had any requests
Yep.
for ramps. Do you know if the Gary residents know how to reach you or how to get in connection with that program? Because I'm sure there may be some that need that.
Yeah, and I was, as I said, I came in July 9th, and so I've leaned heavily on the wonderful staff that was already in the office, and they indicated that the way they usually get those requests in are through council people, because that council person may know someone in their district. The program has been going on for a number of years. We put it on the website along with our emergency rehab program. So those applications are there, but you're absolutely right. And if you think there's somewhere that we could advertise it to make sure people knew about it, we're happy. The funding is there, so we're happy to make sure it gets done.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilwoman Barnes Caldwell.
Where our residents are interested in getting their roofs fixed, and you all discontinued that project, so they're not thinking about ramps right now.
We would love to be able to fix roofs and everything else, and windows and other things that the seniors and other people in the community want us to do. But our issue is we don't have contractors that are willing to work with community development. Community development has a lot of extra requirements that the city of Gary does not have. The way they are registered, the type of materials they have to buy, everything must be made in America. There are some requirements, and it was interesting when I got there because as you all sit there, I used to sit there and say, why can't we find any Gary contractors? And I have certainly learned that they are hard to find, or ones that are willing to work within the program are hard to find. So we have one guy who is taking on our emergency repairs, and so that's the only reason we were able to keep our emergency repairs still up and running because we found this one contractor. So if you know anybody, please send them our way. They must be licensed and bonded through the city of Gary. We have the reciprocity program now, so it makes it a lot easier. We're happy if you send them to us. So that's our housing administration. Data collection, we always have
Wait a
that.
minute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a general comment, when you all go back, the corresponding operating budget, we just need to reflect the right totals as well for 2023. And mainly at the full-time salaries position, you see how it has that 172. And do you know what the professional service line item was in 2023?
I'm looking for it now.
It was a 64,277.
I see that 64. I suspect that at that time we did have a contractual attorney. All the number crunching for most community development, that HUD Trust, the Indianapolis HUD Office Trust, and we allocate $20,000 to them on a yearly basis.
Okay.
Now we're to general administration. So this is the bulk of all of our salaried employees. The changes that you'll see is fiscal specialist 1 was eliminated. That position was eliminated based on our reallocation. The compliance manager also was eliminated. She retired. Evelyn Aponte, she was with the city for 40 years. A wonderful employee, and when I first got there, we met and she said that it's been 40 years. And she told me she was gonna retire at the end of October, but I asked her to stay until the end of December, and she did. And so she helped us through our 2024 annual action plan, our 2023 CAPER, just to make sure we were in compliance with HUD. So we will not be replacing that position. Between myself and our deputy director, we'll be taking on the compliance responsibilities in the office. And everybody else, as you can see, there were increases across the board. And we added an economic development director at the bottom. That person will get paid half salary from CDBG and half salary from the general fund for a total of $80,000.
And just for council members, it's under 801 in the general fund redevelopment budget. Any questions or comments, colleagues? Vice President Latham?
Thank you. I'm just, when you say that the compliance responsibilities are gonna be split between the director and deputy director in a real way, I'm just wondering what's the plan?
Oh,
for that?
yeah, so, as I was saying, when I started, community development is really interesting because it's like there's all this money and everyone's like, oh, community development has so much money. But there are really limitations on what we can spend it on and how we can spend it. And so the compliance manager was the person, if you said, hey, can I replace 10 streetlights? You would say, hey, where does this fall under CDBG? And so that is also a role, though, that the previous director, I am more hands-on, I think, in the day-to-day operations of community development. And so in doing that, I think that everybody has kind of picked up a bit more responsibility than they felt like they had before. There's a lot more working together, a lot more teamwork between the different employees in community development. And so now, when we're talking about different projects, everybody has something that they need to do. Somebody has to determine what the budget is going to be for the project.